A child in a coma returns with an unbelievable spiritual account. She says she visited heaven, but was expelled from there by an angel. What seems impossible turns into a powerful divine message about purpose, prayer, and the mission that each person carries on earth. In this revealing video, you will learn about the testimony that is touching thousands of hearts and awakening deep reflections about life after death, the signs of God, and the strength of faith. Get ready for a transformative experience that goes beyond logic and invites you to look up. Could it be that this child was chosen to deliver a spiritual warning? Find out now. Something in your heart moved just imagining what's to come, so leave a like right now. It shows that you're ready to dive into this message. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, because here each video is more than content. It's a call, a sign. You are not here by chance. His name is Austin Reynolds, a boy of just 8 years old from the city of Amarillo in the heart of Texas, an ordinary child, the kind that fills the house with laughter, questions, and that innocence that life has not yet had time to corrupt. But that afternoon, the laughter stopped, and something unbelievable happened. It was a bright, sunny Saturday with clear skies. Austin was at his grandparents' house, as he did almost every weekend. He ran barefoot around the yard, played with his cousins, and laughed loudly. The sound of childhood filled the air. The house smelled like corn cake, and the family's voices mingled with the noise of the television playing an old game. Grandpa was sitting on the porch, silently reading the Bible, as usual. Everything seemed at peace. It was then that Austin saw the orange ball bounce off the ground and roll across the lawn. She passed through the trees and went gently down an inclined section, stopping very close to a small wooden structure that stood at the end of the land, a type of improvised lookout, built by her grandfather years ago. It was a simple platform, with 4 steps and a low wall surrounded by bushes. Austin loved that place. He said that up there he felt closer to God. He would go up and watch the birds, the sunset, and sometimes, according to his grandmother, he would murmur prayers alone. Without thinking twice, Austin ran to the platform. He walked up the steps in a hurry. The feet were damp, still dirty with dirt, and it was at that exact moment, upon reaching the last step, that everything happened. The right foot slipped. The wood, worn by time and rain, was slippery. He lost his balance and fell backwards. It was a dry, quick, silent fall. Austin's head hit the edge of a rock that decorated the garden just below the structure. The impact was so strong that the hollow sound spread into the air like an invisible warning. For a few seconds, no one saw it. But soon, a scream broke the atmosphere. It was his younger cousin who ran into the house, shouting his name. The grandfather, scared, dropped the Bible on the floor and ran to the bottom. The scene he encountered was terrifying. Austin lay motionless, his eyes closed, and blood slowly dripped from the back of his head. Grandfather's heart almost stopped. The grandmother ran to the phone and called 911. The mother, who was on her way home, received the news in the middle of the road and sped off with her hands shaking. Help arrived quickly. The paramedics performed the first treatment right there, on the garden floor. They stabilized his neck, put him on oxygen, controlled the bleeding, and ordered immediate air transport to the most advanced medical center in the region, in Lubbock. During the helicopter flight, Austin's heartbeat was unstable. The professionals did everything they could to keep him conscious, but he didn't react. He was unconscious with clear signs of severe head trauma. Upon arriving at the university hospital, Austin was taken straight to the pediatric intensive care unit. The medical team acted with precision and speed. The images showed what no one wanted to hear: head trauma, internal bleeding, and signs of brain edema. Intracranial pressure was increasing. He had fallen into a deep coma. From that moment on, the invisible war began. The war that is not fought with weapons but with knees bent and prayers whispered between sobs. Austin's mother, a woman of firm faith and a soft voice, didn't leave his side. She knelt by the bed, holding her son's little hand and saying over and over again, "Lord, he is yours, but I beg you, do not take him now." She didn't scream. She prayed intensely, with soul, with the strength of a mother who knows that above any diagnosis, there is a God who works miracles. The family started a prayer chain. Groups of evangelical churches joined together in vigils. Pastors who didn't even know Austin began to intercede. His name began to circulate on prayer lists, live services, cell meetings, and even outside the country. Faith crossed borders, while his body remained immobile. But the spirit, Well, Austin's spirit was no longer there, at least not in the way that science can explain. Time in the ICU was counted in long minutes, artificial respirations and constant beeping. The nurses changed shifts in silence. The doctors did their best. But between one medication and another, the words were repeated. Just a miracle now. At the end of the 7th day, the responsible doctor asked for a conversation with the parents. Intracranial pressure did not decrease. The clinical picture showed no evolution. The words were harsh. There was nothing to be done other than maintain life support and wait. Wait for the body to react, or accept the match. But the mother didn't accept it. That same night, she placed a sheet of paper next to Austin's bed. He wrote in his own handwriting a prayer. He asked that if he could hear, he read with his heart. He told his son, in a low voice, with tears running down his face, "Son, if you're listening to me, come back. God still has something beautiful to do through your life. You are light, Austin, you are purpose." And it was there, in that silent room, among wires, machines, and tears, that something began to change. Austin's body remained motionless. Vital signs were stable, but far from any expectation of significant improvement. However, while the eyes of science only saw an unconscious boy, something inexplicable was happening in another dimension, one that no medical equipment could record. Suddenly, as if he had woken up inside a dream that was more real than reality itself, Austin felt relief. It was as if the weight of her small body had disappeared. Nothing hurt, nothing bothered. There was no noise of machines, no nervous voices, no tears. Everything had gone silent, in a strange yet welcoming way. And then he realized it wasn't there anymore. Austin, even though he was only 8 years old, managed to describe with impressive clarity what for many is just a mystery. He said that the first sensation was that of floating. He said it felt like he was being lifted by something invisible, a gentle but firm force. He looked down and saw his own body, and all around, the doctors. A nurse was squeezing his wrist. One of the doctors was touching his chest, as if waiting for an answer. He couldn't hear their words clearly, but he knew they were trying to revive him. He was not afraid, just saw. He observed everything like someone watching a scene from a distance, with a strange peace. The mother was kneeling. I cried. He whispered a prayer. Austin said he felt her love, as if an invisible thread was keeping him connected to her, even though he was above her body. I knew she was praying for me. I heard it in my heart, not in my ears, he said later. And that phrase, no one knew how to explain it. While watching everything, something happened. Austin said he was surrounded by a light. It wasn't just any light. It wasn't like the hospital lamps, nor was it like sunlight. It was livelier, brighter, but at the same time it didn't hurt the eyes. It was a light that calmed, that warmed you inside. And little by little, this light began to take over everything around. The hospital environment was disappearing. The stretcher, the doctors, the devices, everything dissolved like smoke in the face of that indescribable light. He was being taken, not with your feet, not with effort. It was as if he was being pulled gently, as if he were flying without flapping his wings, without gravity. Austin said it was like floating on a river of light. There was no time, there was no pain. And along the way, something curious happened. He said he started remembering things he didn't know he knew. Old memories, sensations that he didn't quite understand, but that seemed to be part of something bigger. The place he arrived at was not like Earth. There were no buildings, no streets, no common voices. There was presence, an intense, serene presence that made the heart calm down. He described it as an immense field where everything was alive. The light did not come from a sun. It came from all directions, and this light seemed to have consciousness. He seemed to notice his presence. It was as if the place itself welcomed him with a silent embrace. The colors were different, more intense, purer. The trees didn't look ordinary, they glowed. The air, according to him, was not just for breathing, it was for feeling. He said that in that environment, everything seemed made of love, but not just any love, a love that heals, that understands, that forgives, a love that speaks without using words. And then Austin stopped. He said that his feet, even without touching the ground, remained firm in that place, as if that moment was different from all the others. That's when he felt a new presence, strong, intense, almost impossible to describe. From the middle of the light, a silhouette appeared. A being, tall, immense, with wings that seemed to be made of liquid gold. Wings that moved as if they were part of the light itself. The face was calm, but serious. There was majesty in that figure. Austin said he didn't feel threatened, but he felt authority. A deep respect came over him. It was as if his soul recognized that being before he even understood what was happening. This being didn't speak with its mouth, but Austin understood everything. The first thing he felt was that that being knew exactly who he was. I knew everything about him, and yet I loved him intensely. There was no judgment, just truth. And then the message came. Austin did not reveal every word said. He just said that the angel approached and, with an expression of firmness and compassion, said something that he would never forget. "You can't stay here." These words resonated in his heart like silent thunder. Austin, still small, responded, not with words, but with feeling. He didn't want to go back. He was at peace. He didn't feel pain. He didn't understand why he would have to leave there. But the angel repeated, "It's not your time yet. You have a mission." And it was at that moment, according to him, that something inside him broke. He wanted to understand. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to stay. But he felt that it was bigger than him, that there was a purpose, that there was something waiting for him, down there, again. And then he began to feel his body being pulled. The light was moving away. The atmosphere was disappearing. The presence of that angel, still there, watched him with eyes that, according to Austin, were not of anger or judgment, but of urgency, as if every second away from that mission was precious. And the only thing Austin could think was, why? Why him? Why did he see all that? Why did I have to go back? Maybe you've already felt this, that moment when everything seems to push you towards something bigger, in which your soul begins to understand that there is a greater purpose than what the eyes can see, where you feel like you need to go back and accomplish something. Near-death experiences awaken dormant purposes. When faith finds meaning, everything changes. Write in the comments, "I believe in God's purpose." Your statement could be the answer someone has been waiting for. And it doesn't go away, because what happened to Austin when he returned to his body will still affect you deeply. The feeling of returning was not like waking up from a dream. It wasn't sudden nor abrupt. It was like he was being gently pulled away from something he loved, something he didn't want to leave behind. Like a silent farewell to a place that made sense, that was familiar, even if he had never been there before. Austin couldn't express with exact words everything he was feeling at that moment, but there was something deep happening inside him. A type of internal struggle, as if his soul was being pulled in two directions, a part that wanted to stay, to rest, to be enveloped forever by that infinite peace, and another that began to feel the weight of something much bigger calling him back, as if a whisper from eternity said, "You're not done yet." It was then that he looked at that immense being once again. The angel, who hadn't stopped watching him for even a second, came closer. The eyes of that being were not ordinary. Austin described it as eyes that saw everything. He said there was no way to lie to them. It was as if, when looking into the angel's eyes, everything about his existence was revealed. There was no hiding any intention, no thought, no memory, and yet he felt love, a love that did not accuse, but understood, a love that was both mercy and truth. The angel did not speak with anger, nor with coldness, but there was urgency in his voice. It was as if time was running, even in that place where time seemed to not exist. The voice rang clearly inside Austin, not in his ears, but directly in his soul. "You can't stay here, Austin." He didn't understand. He felt like this was his home, that there he was whole. But before he could react, the angel added, "It's not your time yet. You have something important to do among the humans. Go back." The words were engraved inside him, as if they echoed in layers of his consciousness that had not yet fully formed. Among humans, Austin, even at 8 years old, understood that there was a responsibility being handed over, a type of mission that transcended his age, his understanding, and even his will. He still didn't know what or when or how, but I knew there was a why, and it was that why that was bringing him back. There were no further explanations. There was no debate. There was no choice. The truth was handed to him as a non-negotiable calling, a seed planted directly in the center of your existence. He described it as if heaven itself had entrusted him with something, and that he was now the bearer of a sacred responsibility. But that didn't make him feel afraid. Quite the opposite. Austin said that even though he didn't want to leave that place, something inside him said it was the right thing to do, that he needed to fulfill what was entrusted to him. And it was exactly at that moment that he felt something different, a strong heat, not from the external light, but from the inside out, as if a spark had ignited inside his chest, a gentle but intense fire, as if marked by an eternal truth. "You were sent to remember," he heard. I didn't know exactly what. I didn't know who for, but that phrase kept repeating itself in his mind. "You were sent to remember." The memory of Earth began to slowly return, as if a fog was being lifted, and his body's memory began to awaken. He felt the pull of gravity, the density of the material world taking shape again. The sensation wasn't painful, but it was uncomfortable. It was as if I were putting on old, tight clothing after wearing something made of light. But the strangest thing was what he began to notice upon his return. He could still hear the sound of his mother's voice. He still felt the spiritual environment around him. Not like before, but still present. And in that brief moment before he returned completely, he caught one last glimpse of the angel. The eyes of the celestial being looked at him one last time, as if conveying a silent responsibility, and with a slight movement of the head, as if blessing someone with a mission, the angel disappeared into the light. Austin felt like he was falling, not into space, but inside himself, as if he were crossing layers of existence to return to the physical world. And in the next instant, everything went dark. This moment, this in-between place between worlds, between heaven and earth, between mission and childhood, between light and the body, was what shaped what would come next. It was in this interval that something spiritual, eternal and profoundly divine revealed itself to a child, a revelation that, although not completely understood at that moment, would leave its mark on everyone around him. Doctors say there is no way to measure an experience like this, that the brain in a coma can generate hallucinations, that extreme trauma can activate unknown areas of the mind. But what Austin saw, felt, and carried with him when he woke up is something that goes beyond explanation. And when he returned, nothing would be the same again. When Austin's eyes opened, it wasn't like waking from sleep. It was like the rebirth of something that had crossed the veils of the invisible and returned with something imprinted on the soul. The room was still the same. The monitors were still on. The lights still flickered in time with his beats. But there was something new there, something that no one could explain. A presence, an atmosphere that made even the nurse responsible for that shift shiver from head to toe. She entered the room as she did every day, ready to check vitals, adjust cables, write down the same numbers as always. But at that moment something stopped. She noticed a slight movement. The fingers on his right hand moved, an almost imperceptible contraction. Then the lips, a slight tremor, and then the eyes. The right eyelid lifted first, then left, slowly, no rush, as if your eyes were adapting again to the density of the physical world. The astonished nurse ran to call the doctors. The parents, who had just gone out for coffee after 7 days of vigil, rushed back when they heard the emergency alarm. But there was no emergency in the medical sense. It was a different kind of emergency, a manifestation of what science does not know where to place, a break in the logic of biology, a point of intersection between faith and the inexplicable. Austin was awake. The first glance he cast was at the ceiling, not for the doctors' faces, not for the mother's eyes. He stared as if he saw something above the very structure of that place, as if he was still seeing a piece of where he had just left. And then he turned his head toward his mother with a slight smile, serene but full of something she had never seen in him before, something mature, something old, something spiritual. "Mommy," he said, his voice still weak, "I saw God." The room stopped. Nobody said anything. The mother fell to her knees, hands to her face, overcome with a cry that was not just relief, but an inner recognition that something bigger was happening here. The doctors, although accustomed to the limits of life and death, had no answers for that. Austin, with his eyes open, looked around as if he didn't fully recognize his surroundings, and he added, "He has eyes like the sun, but they don't burn. They see everything." The words didn't come with hesitation. They were not delusions, nor words released from a confused brain. They were statements spoken with a clarity and weight that no one would expect from a child of just 8 years old. From that moment on, changes began to emerge, one by one, like small signs left for those who were attentive to what God was doing. Austin started talking differently. He chose words he had never used before. He asked questions that seemed to come from someone much older. He asked about biblical passages, mentioned names that no one had mentioned before. Sometimes he said phrases that left everyone silent. "I know I'll still go back there, but not now. There are people who are here, but they are already being called. There are things that the eyes don't see, but the heart knows." These phrases, spoken with an almost supernatural tranquility, became part of his daily life. His grandmother began to write down everything he said. The father, who until then had maintained a more restrained faith, began reading the Bible every night with his son. Something inside the house had changed. Something in the family's spiritual environment was transformed. And it didn't stop there. Austin began to have a sensitivity that hadn't existed before. He seemed to notice when someone was sad, even if they were smiling on the outside. He touched people's hands and said things like, "Don't worry, he's with you." On one occasion, when he saw the nurse who always looked after him with tired eyes, he said calmly, "You pray alone before going to sleep. He listens." These small gestures, these words full of discernment, began to mark his presence anywhere. Even the ICU professionals, accustomed to stories of overcoming, were deeply touched by the presence of that boy. One of them said in an informal tone, "I don't know what this boy saw, but he came back different." And it was true. Austin wasn't just the same boy he was before. He laughed, he joked, he asked questions about dinosaurs and video games, but something in him had changed. A presence, a sense of purpose, a calmness that was not common in children his age. His mother says that after leaving the hospital, he started waking up every morning at 3:15 a.m., always at the same time. He would go to his parents' room, put his hand on his mother's chest and say, "It's okay, Mum. You can go back to sleep." And he went back to his bed. No fear, no hesitation. Another change that caught attention was his relationship with nature. Austin said that he heard the wind speak, that the trees sang praises, and that the birds warned us when something was wrong. He began to draw with intensity, colors, lights, geometric shapes. In one of the drawings, made a week after leaving the hospital, he drew a man with open arms within a field of light. Above it were words written in crooked but legible letters. "He saw me before I was." Phrases like this, coming from a child, are not easily explained. They stir something inside us. They touch places that are normally hidden in the rush of everyday life. They awaken spiritual memories that may have been dormant over time. And when Austin was asked what it all meant, he didn't say much. He just smiled and replied, "You'll understand. One day." This maturity, this intuitive wisdom, began to attract attention. Religious leaders in the region wanted to meet him. Some wanted to take him to events, churches, programs. But the family, firm in preserving what was most sacred, refused all proposals. They said, "He's not attraction, he's testimony." And they decided that their story would only be told when the time was right. But something was already evident. That boy had not returned from the coma just to continue his life. He had returned with something inside him that touched, awakened, bothered, in the best sense of the word, everyone who crossed his path. Seeing little Austin back to life, speaking so clearly about what he felt, saw, and carries within himself, forces anyone to pause and think. What if this isn't all just a story? What if these spiritual experiences, which we so often ignore, are actually reminders, divine invitations to wake up from a life that we are often living in automatic mode? Have you ever stopped to think about what you're really doing here? Not here watching this video, but here on earth. What is the true purpose of your existence? Because if even a child, innocent, small, fragile in the eyes of the world, was touched, was taken for a moment to another, spiritual plane, and sent back with a mission, what does that say about us? There is no way to simply listen to all this and carry on as if nothing had happened. These stories, these near-death experiences, are more than spiritual curiosities. They are signs, alerts, calls. They are like a whisper from heaven trying to break through the noise of the world. And maybe today, that whisper is reaching you. Maybe this is the moment when your soul, even though you don't fully understand it, is remembering that there is something to accomplish, something urgent to live, something eternal that can no longer be postponed. What this Austin story shows us, in all its purity and depth, is that life is not random. that the time we spend here has weight, it has destiny, it has responsibility, and maybe, just maybe, we are being reminded that eternity doesn't begin when we die. It begins now in the choices we make, in the steps we take, in the people we touch. Think with me, how many times have you felt deep in your soul that there was something more, that even without understanding, you were made for something greater, that there is a mission hidden behind your routine, behind the pain you went through, behind the silence of your prayers? What if God was waiting for the right moment to show you? What if this story, this narrative you're watching now, is part of that revelation? What Austin experienced was not just a trip of the mind. It was a dive into a spiritual reality that many deny, some ignore, but which is more present than we imagine. And the most impactful thing is realizing that even after experiencing something so profound, he didn't come back exalted. He returned humble, silent, serene, like someone carrying a secret too precious to be wasted. How many of us, even without having experienced an NDE, have had moments when we felt like something called us back? An accident that could have been fatal, an illness from which we recovered without explanation, an intuition that saved our life, a deliverance that we couldn't explain. How many times has something taken us from the edge of the abyss and put us back on our feet? Was this chance? Isn't that just God telling us that there is still something to be done, that it's not time to stop yet, that we still have a task among humans? When we hear stories like this, there is always a choice to be made, doubt or awaken. And awakening is painful because it demands change, it requires courage, it demands a fresh start. But maybe all you're waiting for right now isn't a direct answer. Maybe it's a reminder. And if this video is serving that purpose, then it was worth it. Maybe you're living in days where everything seems meaningless. Maybe you are praying for a sign, for direction, for confirmation that your life matters. Well, here it is. Even a child was chosen to remember that God still speaks, still acts, still sends, still awakens. And if he did this to a child, he can do it to you too. Have you ever asked yourself, why am I still here? Why, even after everything I've been through, have I stayed alive? Why did fate spare me from that situation? Why didn't that tragedy take me with it? Was it just luck? Or were you, like Austin, brought back for a reason? Most people are always running around trying to achieve goals, solve problems, pay bills, please others, but they forget to ask, what does heaven expect from me? What is the mission that my soul promised to fulfill before being born? What did I come to deliver to the world? Who do I need to reach? What is the legacy I am leaving? This is the time to reflect. This is the time to remember that life is short, but the purpose is eternal. That everything you build here, if it is not connected to God's greater plan, will crumble like sand in the wind. But everything you live in obedience, in compassion, in faith, remains forever. And if a child, without having read theology, without having studied doctrines, without having attended seminars, can return with this awareness, what stops you from starting now? You don't have to wait for a near-death experience to wake up. You just need to listen. And perhaps today, God is speaking to you like this, in silence, through a story, through a child, through this video. If you are here until now, it is because something inside you felt it. It doesn't matter your religion, your life story, or even if you believe everything you hear. The truth is that some stories touch places that we didn't even know were open. And maybe that's exactly why this story found you today, because in the midst of so much noise, so many distractions, there are moments when heaven finds us in a subtle and profound way. I don't know what your life is like now. Maybe you are living in difficult times, with unanswered questions, pains that no one sees, longings that only you understand. Or maybe you're just silent, waiting for something to make sense. And even if no one knows what's going on inside you, God knows. He sees. He even listens to the thoughts that you don't have the courage to turn into prayer. And that's why I ask you with all respect and truth, have you ever been through something similar? Something that science hasn't explained, but your spirit understood? Any moment when you felt like you were touched by something bigger, that you escaped a tragedy, that you had a premonition, a dream, a vision, a feeling that someone from heaven protected you or brought you back? Maybe you haven't told anyone this. Maybe you're afraid of looking crazy. But here, in this space, you can speak. Here there is a place for stories like yours. Here there is respect for experiences that cannot be put into words. but that leave marks on the soul. If you have experienced something like this, or know someone who has gone through a near-death experience, an unusual spiritual experience, a vision, an encounter that cannot be explained, write here in the comments. Tell me. Open your heart, because what you carry inside could be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And more. If you feel it in your heart, write the phrase, "I was called back to," or "God brought me back for a reason." These words have power. They are declarations of faith, of courage, that you recognize that you are still here for a purpose, and that even without understanding everything, you choose to continue. God often uses testimonies like this to awaken others. Maybe today this story about little Austin was the answer you were looking for. Maybe it's echoing inside you, bringing light to places that were dark, rekindling dreams you thought were lost, or simply reminding you that you're not alone. And if this happened to you, don't keep it to yourself. There is someone who needs to hear this today. There is someone on your side, in your family, among your friends, at work, who is also trying to understand why you are here. Someone who also feels the weight of life, but has not yet discovered its value. Someone who urgently needs to know that the soul does not die, that the spirit has destiny, that there is life after death, and that while there is breath, there is a calling to be fulfilled. Then send this video to that person. Share with someone who needs faith, direction, hope, with someone who needs to know that there is still time, that there is still a path, that there is still a plan. Because if this story touched you, imagine what it can do to someone who is silent now, crying inside, needing to hear exactly that their life has value, that God still speaks, that the purpose still stands. You have no idea how many lives can be reached by your simple action. A share, a comment, a word that comes from your heart can be the instrument that heaven will use to transform someone. And sometimes that's what God needs, a willing heart. And if you feel, even if it's just a whiff, a slight, almost timid urge to write something down here, write. Don't hesitate, because this exchange, this space, is more than digital. It's spiritual. Here, there are people of faith, of soul, of history, people who also have experiences with the supernatural, with angels, with light, with God, with signs that science cannot explain. And when these stories meet, something happens, something changes, something heals. Commenting is more than interacting. It's giving back to the world the faith that touched you inside. Sharing is extending hope to those who need to remember that they are not alone. He writes in the comments, "I believe in spiritual experiences. Every word has power, and yours could be exactly what turns the light on someone's journey, because recognizing that your journey has a greater meaning is the beginning of transformation. And maybe, just maybe, this is the time to walk with purpose again. Remember that, like Austin, you were also sent back for a reason, feeling something that cannot be explained, a shiver in your soul, a tear that came without warning, or the silent certainty that God spoke to you. All of this reveals that this message found exactly your heart. Nothing is by chance when heaven decides to touch someone. When something touches you deeply, it is because it carries a purpose. This type of connection does not happen by chance. It is a response, direction, renewal. Subscribe to the channel and continue this journey of faith, where each message brings you closer to what God has for your life. Here, you are not just watching, you are awakening. When something truly touches your heart, giving back is an act of faith. Leave a like. This helps this message reach those who need to hear it most. Getting this far shows that something spoke to you inside, so it proves that you listened with your soul. Something even deeper awaits you in the next video that appears on your screen. Click now and continue this journey. There is something there that can speak directly to you. We meet there.